Hello, friends and neighbors around the world. We are here with the path to modern web development with Ikius. We've got Max on the line, Max all the way from Finland, and I'm joining you here in the bustling town of Port Hope, Ontario. All 8,000 of us are very excited about this webinar today. Lots of stuff going on. We have several people on the line, but really excited to see what you guys say. First thing I want to do is, like, wherever you are in the world, pop that into the chat just to say where you're joining from. I get a real kick out of seeing where people are from, and also what time it is, because I know that for Max, what time is it there for you, Max?
It's 9 p.m., so it's quite late, but
well,
it's okay.
That's not very convenient for you. It's 2 p.m. for me. It's perfect. Ooh, midnight for Sri Lanka. Yikes. Miami.
Miami.
Malta. This is amazing. Leipzig.
Yeah.
Wow. I speak a little bit of German. Max, you probably speak a little bit of German. People in Europe tend to speak more languages. Ich bin Ausländer und spreche nicht Deutsch. That's me. That's all I know.
Yeah, I speak more Swedish than German, but I think they're related.
Cool. This is great. Nigeria. Oh my gosh. This is really exciting. Before we get started, just a couple sort of housekeeping things. These webinars are something Agility has done since we basically canceled our in-person conferences. What we've noticed is these online conferences are doing great. These little webinars, they're short, lots of information. This is going to be a real conversational style webinar. So please, if you have any questions, join in the chat, ask your question. We have a couple people from Agility moderating the chat. I'll keep an eye on there too, and then we'll answer your question if we can. But you know, we're here to learn from each other and about each other, and I'm just astounded how great this is from people all over the world to join in this webinar. It's amazing. Thank you so much for showing up. A couple of events that are coming up. We have the jam.dev coming up in January on 28th and 29th. So it's a 2-day development conference specifically on JAMstack. So the stuff that you learn about and get really excited about learning about from Max today, you can learn more at this conference. I'll be speaking, as well as tons of other leaders in the sort of JAMstack ecosystem will be speaking. And if I'm not, I think we're going to be giving away 10 tickets, Olga, I believe, and Josh. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. So stick through to the end of the webinar, and we have 10 free tickets to this conference that we're giving away. There you go. And then the next Agility workshop is going to be JAMstack 101, getting started with 11T. You may have heard of 11T. It's sort of like, it's not Next, it's not Gatsby, it's 11T. But also the creator of 11T is going to be joining us, and this is February the 4th. Really excited about this one. So Zach Leatherman is going to be online helping us learn 11T. So I think that's really excited. So here we go. And one of the things is, you know, I'm from Agility CMS. So go ahead, follow me and Agility at Agility CMS on Twitter. I'm at Joel Vardy on Twitter. And there's all the Agility events you can sign up for and also see previous versions of them, like to download the past webinars, agilitycms.com/events. And check for another link in your chat. If you're a developer, Agility has a Slack community where we just ask, you know, folks that are, you know, Agility developers and working on Headless CMS and working with JAMstack, go ahead, join our community. You can ask us questions there and talk right to the team. All right, got all that stuff out of the way, and you're still with us, so that's great. So the main event, we're here today with Max, and I'm going to try and say your name. You told me how to pronounce it, and I'm going to get it so wrong. Ikius from Ikius, I think I got it right. My name is Joel Vardy. I'm president at Agility CMS. So I've been in the industry, you know, probably for over 20 years, working at Agility for about 15 years. I come from a .NET background, a full stack .NET background. I'm a SQL developer, and I've worked actually on the Agility CMS platform, as well as taking, you know, that stuff in the back end and building front end sites and building JAMstack sites. And Agility used to be an agency. Not many people know this. We actually used to build websites for customers, and the CMS came out of that experience. So it's interesting to talk to a guy like Max, who is in the industry as an agency right now. So I'm really excited to have a conversation with him about that. And so from there, I'm going to give it over to Max to introduce himself and to get started.
Yeah. So hey everyone, my name is Max Ikäheimo. and I am the founder and CEO of Ikius. Ikius is a Finnish web development agency, and Ikius was founded in 2019. And the reason why I'm here to speak to you all about JAMstack is that we focus only on JAMstack development for our website clients. So we actually don't do any WordPress development or anything like that. So we focus only on new technologies for JAMstack. And yeah, we've been partnering up with Agility CMS to do all kinds of cool things with JAMstack and Headless CMSs. And I'm also here to tell you guys a bit more about my experience as an agency founder doing JAMstack projects for our clients. So as Agility CMS is also a Headless CMS, and Headless CMSs are a huge part of JAMstack sites. And we've been using many different Headless CMSs and static site generators for our JAMstack projects. What do you think, Joel, is the key advantage of JAMstack sites for any kind of website project?
Well, I mean, for me, part of it is it's just so much easier to get started than it is to work with to work with the language. So it's all written in JavaScript. Now, a lot of people work in TypeScript too. Won't get into that too much, but just being able to code in JavaScript to start with, it means that I don't need to learn a bunch of other stuff just to pull everything together. I think that's part of the biggest advantage as it's sort of getting started as a beginner. Looking at this now from a lot of business customers and enterprise customers that are coming to us, banks, real estate folks, like insurance companies, all different kinds of folks, there's a huge security aspect of this and performance. So that's what we've seen. I don't know about you Max. What about you?
Yeah, so I've also seen the trend that many huge companies are going JAMstack from platforms like WordPress and other legacy platforms. I actually used to work in a company where we did a lot of legacy websites with WordPress. Right. And that's when I got the idea that, hey, there must be a better way to do websites than WordPress.
Be something better,
because, yeah, because as a developer back then, it was really not a pleasant experience for me to work with. And as I worked with WordPress, I knew that, hey, these websites are not great for huge enterprise companies because we're using very outdated technologies and the performance is not great. And we're seeing a lot of security issues. So that's when I got the idea that, hey, there might be a better way to do this. And at that time, JAMstack was gaining popularity really quickly. And ever since that, we've been doing JAMstack sites for clients, and we've been able to offer that security and performance. But of course, when we're transitioning from a traditional legacy world of WordPress, Drupal, etc., it might be hard to transition for clients from that traditional monolithic package style website builder to something a bit different, like a Headless CMS, static site generator, Netlify, Vercel, all that stuff. So that's been one of the biggest challenges to communicate for clients that, hey, this is a new type of thing we're doing, and we're actually combining multiple technologies here, and instead of just having it in one package. But I believe at Agility, you're trying to do that, and you're trying to make it easier for JAMstack developers to handle everything in your CMS, right?
So I think what you're getting at, Max, is probably the crux of like not just JAMstack, but I think the API-driven internet, right? Which I think encompasses Headless CMS, Headless Ecommerce, and a lot of other stuff. You talked about, you didn't say the word, but developer experience. Certainly with JAMstack, I believe, and that's the first thing I said. What do you like JAMstack for? Well, I can code in JavaScript, and that's easy and fun, and I enjoy that language. That's part of the developer experience, which I think is arguably unparalleled, like so much better with JAMstack and with all the different technologies. Yes, there's a lot to learn, but I would guess that I think it's developers that have really pushed it forward because it's such a better experience, and we know we can build more secure and faster performing solutions. From the customer standpoint, from the end user, from the person working on the thing, and when you're trying to pitch a solution as an agency, so much easier to just say it's going to be on WordPress, and then that takes care of everything, and everything that's not in WordPress is a WordPress plugin. And I think that has led WordPress to be, 40% of the internet runs on WordPress, but also if there's a vulnerability found, you read about it every day. 800 million people are like vulnerable to this new plugin vulnerability that happened. So yeah, what we've been talking about a lot at Agility is the editor experience, and actually we didn't talk about the user experience, but that's when we build a site. I think as a developer, we know we can build better websites with JAMstack with a better user experience. So the user experience and the developer experience, hands down, done. But the end user, so the editor experience, I should say, is the one that's like, that's where we work hard to try and first educate people on, what are the capabilities and why is this a better thing, but also learning learning all the different technologies, like you just mentioned. Say a few more of them. Like what did you just mention? Like Netlify,
Headless CMS, Gatsby, static site generator, API-based microservice. So it's a lot of stuff, a lot of words, and oftentimes, like you said, it's a lot easier to say, hey, this is WordPress, so we have it here. But then again, WordPress might not be the best option every time, because for some clients, they need the performance, they need the security, they need to have features that might not be possible with WordPress, at least in the time and budget, given the tools we get with WordPress.
I think of it this way. Do you remember, I'm a pretty old guy. In the tech world, I'm almost a dinosaur. But I remember when, so do you remember the first time you got a laptop that didn't have a CD-ROM in it, didn't have a CD drive? And that was a big deal. And it was Apple computers that started doing it. And I remember Steve Jobs talking about it. It's like, this is the way it's going to be. This is the way the industry is moving. And lots of people push back on that idea, on the idea of, whoa, I need to have everything on CDs. But it makes the world better. But there's a little bit of pain to start with because I have all these CD-ROMs that I can't use. They did the same thing with floppy disk drives, same thing with CD-ROMs, and the same thing with like old school USB ports. And there's some pain with the change, and this we feel like we're losing something. And I think WordPress is like CD-ROMs. It's the CD-ROM of the internet, where we just need to not use that. Certainly there is a place for that. WordPress was meant for blogs, right? So to start a blog, but it's kind of old, and it's as a thing, it's done, I think. Whereas Headless CMS is there's a lot more to talk about in terms of technology and in terms of all the different names and what it can do and how the tools work together, but they work together so much better, and the output and the capability is just such a higher level. And I believe that a lot of people just want, well, what's the next biggest thing? What's the trend going? And they want to be on that trend. And I'm seeing lots of big companies jumping on that trend because they don't want to be caught out using WordPress anymore. But I'm not sure what your opinion is on that.
I mean, from my perspective, a lot of big companies, they usually are pretty aware of the technologies that are trending, because they sometimes, or most of the times, have at least one developer, but they might outsource their development to an agency, or they might seek out tech partners, Headless CMS partners, and so on. So I think the trend is definitely, at least we've seen the trend in our agency operations, where bigger companies might reach out and ask about possible JAMstack solutions for their website. And this has been kind of from our experience at Ikius, that we have three types of customers, really. We have the ones who don't really care what their website is running on. They just want their website to be done in a certain budget and time, and it must look amazing, but they don't care what CMS or front-end framework. Then there's the second group who are so used to WordPress that they just want to have WordPress because they are tech savvy in a sense that they know how to add plugins and change some CSS and do minor modifications. And then there's the third part, which are usually kind of tech companies who know about JAMstack and Headless CMS and specifically look for JAMstack development or Headless CMS integrations and stuff like that. So it's definitely a growing trend for many companies to have that newer tech stack, which can be then expanded much better than, let's say, WordPress. And they want to have this API-based infrastructure for their company, really.
Yeah, and when I talk to like both and two companies that are really, I think, leading the way with taking JAMstack out into the world you mentioned Netlify. So Netlify is like I'd call them like next generation cloud hosting in a way, because they solve a lot of the problems that JAMstack created initially, because they bring together a bunch of tools, brings together your DevOps and the CDN and all that sort of stuff. And Vercel is another one. And the two CEOs are very outspoken about this technology and about their journey towards it. So there's a lot of sort of clout that comes with that, with those guys talking, and with the sort of the developer advocacy that they're doing has really been like over the last 4 or 5 years pushing this industry forward. And now it's getting so popular. And I think that what we're also seeing is like it's getting popular among developers, and it was the developer experience that sort of has led to JAMstack growth. But developers have a lot of clout. They have a lot of say in decision making, more so than ever. And I first experienced this at there's a conference that Agility's been attending for the past several years. It's called SaaStr. It's all SaaS companies. So companies like Stripe and Slack and Box, and like tons of these companies that have become unicorns now in terms of like $billion annual revenues. They've been building APIs. They've been pushing this idea of developers are going to rule the world. They're going to make decisions, and they're going to be, and all of the tools that we use will be talking to each other with APIs. And I think that notion in 2016 was cutting edge. It was bleeding edge. But in 2021, that's like, it's mainstream. It's a mainstream idea. Everything's got an API. Shopify has an API, and everyone's on Shopify. And so this is why we're seeing this trend towards this. So I think it's safe to say, like, we're mainstream. There is still like the WordPress sort of diehards because they're comfortable with it. Folks are comfortable with the WordPress admin. They know what they're getting. So certainly that's a thing. But I'd like to dig into, like, what are the real differences between, I think WordPress is good to use as a frame of reference. So how does WordPress development and WordPress sort of, like, from an agency point of view, you get a project for WordPress, how is that different from a JAMstack project for you guys?
Let's say that we get a WordPress website. To set it up, it's pretty easy. You can nowadays do a one-click install in a cloud server hosting platform like DigitalOcean. It's pretty straightforward to have the WordPress up and running in that sense. And you can also, WordPress has themes, so you can pretty easily install a theme on WordPress, and you can get a simple blog website up and running fairly quickly. Even a web commerce, you can put that up fairly quickly. But when you take a look at these pre-built theme websites and pre-built e-commerce website, you always know that they are a WordPress theme website, because they most of the time look kind of clunky, because if you set it up yourself. And if you want to make it look not clunky or more professional, you have to dig into it as a developer and start doing all kinds of modifications. As a developer myself, it's not a pleasant experience, because WordPress has started out as a simple blogging platform way back in near
2004, 2003, yeah.
Yeah, and it uses like technologies that are built in the 90s. And you can see that in the actual platform, because it has evolved from that tiny convenient blogging platform to a monster that it is today.
Yeah.
So it looks nice to let's say a customer with prepackaged plugins and everything, but as a developer, it's a mess. It doesn't have a architecture, at least in a sense we could, in a computer science terms, define something as an architecture. It's really hard to work with. It's slow to work with. It doesn't have as good tools as the new frameworks, such as the React-based JAMstack frameworks have.
Right.
And
So
it just makes, yeah.
So yeah, so when you're thinking of this project, all of these things that, you know, they come to you, say, I want a WordPress site and I want to do e-commerce on it, and you start going through your mind, how am I going to have the conversation with this customer, because they think they know what they want, and they have a picture, and you can picture what they're going to get at the different phases of that project. There's going to be the initial, hey, we got a site up, oh, it looks clunky, we need to do a new theme, hey, we're going to need all these other plugins, and all of a sudden you have a MySQL database that's exploding, and lots of vulnerability plugins, and having to then do a bunch of custom work in PHP and stuff that now, you know, every time that page gets hit, it's hitting the database and doing all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And you just know that's like, if only we had started with JAMstack. So you get a customer now where you're in the conversation with JAMstack. How do you have that conversation to sort of sell them on the idea of, hey, we're going to build your site with React, and you were starting to talk about that, and we're going to host it on, you know, Netlify or Vercel or something like that. Talk me through that.
Well, the first thing most clients or customers are interested in is the price, to be honest. Of course, many enterprise companies don't care too much about the price and more about the outcome. But if we say a mid-sized company, they care about the price. So that's a great point for JAMstack, because if you want to do something more complicated, okay, WordPress is quick to set up, but if you want to do some API stuff further on, we can say, hey, with this new JAMstack technology, we can, in the long run, reduce your costs by a certain percentage. So that's one key point for selling to clients. And also by demonstrating previous projects and sites built with JAMstack, you can clearly see they're much faster just by visiting one, because page loads are instant. You don't get that slow feeling, and you can just use that as an example and an argument too. And those are, I think, two of the biggest points we use to sell JAMstack for our clients.
Right. So yeah, so price is a big factor. And then let's talk technology for a second. So what is your, you know, I mean, obviously you're going to have a few different stacks that you can choose of. And I would say a stack is like a list of technologies that you're going to sort of stack together to present a solution, right? That's why we say JAMstack. One of the reasons we say JAMstack. Talk me through a couple example stacks that you would use to generate a solution for a customer.
Well, in the past, we've used Gatsby, which is, I'm sure many here know what Gatsby is, but it's a static site generator, and that's used to generate the front end of the website. And then we would use a headless CMS, such as Agility, to manage the content and put up all the content data in a headless platform.
Right.
And then we would use a platform such as Netlify to actually deploy the built static site and deliver it in a cloud environment in an effective way. So that's the kind of stack. There are, of course, many different frameworks for like static site generation, and of course many headless CMSs and so on. But and it's a really the environment changes really quickly, because I remember when I started with Ikius, Gatsby was the main thing, but now in 2 years Gatsby is old, and now we have Next.js, and it's really competitive and evolving in the sense that
Gatsby's old, yeah,
and it's constantly changing, and
now
a lot of
what's interesting, so there's a lot of players, and you say like Gatsby's old, and I would say that's probably true, because I think Gatsby's been around since 2015, so it has evolved a long way, and I think that, you know, in some ways we're seeing it, like, I think at this time last year, it was probably the most exciting static site generator, because it had, you know, Gatsby Cloud was just coming out and a few other things. I think what Gatsby has done is built an amazing platform. It's on top of React. So both Next.js and Gatsby are on top of React. So I would say to people, if you're looking at learning a technology, React is a really good one to learn for JavaScript. Also super complicated because it can get so complex, but you can learn pretty quick too. And Gatsby is a good thing to learn React on. It's one of the first ones I used. I was a .NET developer and had never used, I'd written JavaScript, but I never used React before like honestly, end of 2018 is when I started actually coding in React for the first time. So it's very new to me in my career, but I would consider myself a React expert just because it makes sense to me. I also love Vue. I also love Svelte. But then you have systems like 11t, which are not React at all. So it's interesting. So there's Gatsby, and you also mentioned another one called Next. Why would you choose Next over Gatsby at this point?
Well, Next.js offers, in addition to static site rendering or building, it offers server-side dynamic rendering, which might be something that in more complex projects you might want to have both, because if you have content that changes a lot frequently, like every minute or so, then you want to have that server-side render rather than as a static site, because you would have to rebuild your site every minute, which is not very convenient. So that's why I think Next.js is a very good choice for more complex projects. But I'm saying both Gatsby and Next.js both have their use cases.
Right.
And it's also interesting to see how they're going to evolve, because in a sense, I feel like they're competing with each other a bit, I think. But
yeah, both as like open source platforms. So Gatsby and Next.js are both open source platforms, but they're sponsored in large part by companies that are trying to make a play in the JAMstack sort of business ecosystem. So Gatsby, the open source project, is also Gatsby, the company who has Gatsby Cloud, and basically they build your Gatsby site for you. So, and that integrates pretty well with a lot of other tools such as Netlify. But then you have Vercel, which as a company is a hosting platform. They are the main sponsor of Next.js. So it's really interesting to see how that evolves too. And then you have Netlify, who they don't have a platform, but they have a hosting. They don't have an open source project per se. They just say, hey, we work with all JAMstack sites. And it was Netlify that coined the JAMstack term the first. But I think the word has grown beyond one company at this point for sure.
For sure.
So that's really interesting that you've got the two leaders, and you're sort of Next.js and Gatsby are the two that you normally work with in terms of static site generator, right?
Yeah, that's right. So those are the two frameworks we use because they're both React, and we love to work with React. We're comfortable working with React, and React is a really popular framework, and because it's popular and maintained by Facebook, it's also really future-proof, which is a great thing as well.
Right.
So we know when we pick either of those technologies, we know it's going to exist 5 years from now. Which might not be the case with PHP or something else. So it's
now you also mentioned, and I have of course a lot of bias here, but you also mentioned Headless CMS, and I think probably 2 or 3 years ago, or maybe even a year and a half ago, I'd see a lot of example projects out there that have JAMstack and static site generators that don't have a Headless CMS involved. It was like, get started, write all your code and write all your content in markdown files or whatever. Or I'm still seeing a lot of projects that have content, hard coded into code, which is a real red flag for me, both as a developer, because like as an agency, when Agility was building websites, we literally invented our CMS because we didn't want developers putting content inside their code, because that's just a nightmare, right? It's not what I want to be doing. So that's the whole idea of CMS. But I think we're seeing Headless CMS go hand in hand with JAMstack because we want the developers to write the code, and then we want to hand off the project to our customer to say, here, you own it now. You can edit all the code in all these different languages for whatever the need may be. I know that in Canada it's almost always English and French, and in the US it's something. And if I know we have a couple customers in China and Eastern Asia Pacific, where there's like 25 languages in the web in the site and stuff like that. It's like you can't do that with just code. Like it's just crazy.
Yeah.
Right? So definitely headless CMS goes hand in hand. And I think that folks often get caught on, well, now I have to learn a headless CMS so to do that. So it's really interesting to see how headless CMS, I think, has, as an API driven thing, has really sort of moved on to sort of support JAMstack as an API. So we started with the stack. Let's just stay with this for a second. We have, you're going to pick your static site generator, probably going to use a headless CMS with it. We hope you use Agility, but any headless CMS is better than nothing. And someone just mentioned in the comments, you can actually use WordPress as a headless CMS. I have some problems with that, but you can totally do it. Certainly, there's a lot of WordPress sites out there that you could do that from. But so we've got that, and then you have to decide on some place to host it. And you mentioned Netlify. Is Netlify your hosting platform of choice?
Yeah, at the moment it is, because again, when we back in the day 2019, when the company was founded,
in the olden days
was the thing, and then became Next, and it was not Jade.co before it was Vercel, which is another big hosting platform you mentioned before, the company behind Next.js. And it really wasn't that big when we started, so we chose Netlify because, of course, we want to use one platform to host everything. But now, again, the competition has evolved, and we have two big platforms. But
you guys, so it's interesting because Agility, like agilitycms.com, is hosted on Netlify. It's amazing. What I think is amazing about both Netlify and Vercel is the free offerings are so generous. These companies have had a ton of money injected into them. Like they're really raising money quickly, and they're kind of reminding me of Google. Like they're kind of like the new Google of the internet, because they're raising a ton of cash, and they're basically giving away a lot for free. I don't know if they'll always do this. It's a really good sort of thing to follow, but the free offerings from both those companies are stupendous. You can practically run your website for free on Netlify if you don't need an SLA. And what we're seeing is the enterprise offering. So if you're a bigger company, if your customers are bigger customers, the enterprise offering from both companies is very robust. So it's interesting to see that they're kind of crossing the chasm of like enterprise, because they have this free offering that developers are really excited about, right? And they're easy to use. I mean, so, you're, in terms of your workflow, like you as a developer, you're going to put your code in GitLab or GitHub or something like that, point that repo to, Netlify, set up your environment variables for your, Agility CMS or whatever it is, and then you're good to go. That's like the CMS, the static site generator, and the hosting. What other tools tend to be involved in your process? In terms of, obviously you can have development tools. I meant to say, like, what other like APIs?
Well, a lot of companies nowadays, which want to do JAMstack in general, want to do e-commerce with JAMstack, because one of the biggest benefits of a JAMstack site, in addition to the price and all that stuff, is that you can have literally millions of users on the site without it crashing. So you can put up a big ad and have 1 million users hop onto your site at the same time without any effect on performance, and you don't have to worry about crashing your server. So what this does, it makes it a very good architecture for e-commerce. So one of our clients, Hoja Radio, we've built a custom e-commerce platform for them. So Stripe plays a big role in their system. So we integrate to different payment APIs, sometimes headless Shopify and other e-commerce platforms. So that's probably the biggest API thing we use in our JAMstack projects. So payment APIs,
Yeah. Okay. So let's dig into a couple different options of those, because I think that's something we've seen come up a lot as well, especially during COVID, where a lot of businesses are turning to tools like Shopify. Shopify stock has gone through the roof because, and other tools like BigCommerce and some other ones that are, because you mentioned headless Shopify, but I can just start a Shopify store, which to me, Shopify is also kind of like the WordPress of e-commerce, right?
Yeah.
I could just go start a Shopify store, and there is a lot of documentation that says Shopify is a CMS, even though it really isn't. It's a e-commerce platform. It's amazing. I'm so proud that it's a Canadian company, and I'm Canadian, and it's pretty cool. And so that's a thing about that. So, but you mentioned headless e-commerce as part of a JAMstack site, which I think is really, really exciting. So I can pull my products in from Shopify or BigCommerce or whatever, and I can pull my content in from Headless CMS like Agility, and then I use Gatsby or Next.js to render it all together and output it as static content. How does someone then go and purchase something? How does that work?
Well, it's pretty simple. You pull your content from, let's say, Headless Shopify.
Yep.
So you pull your content from their platform, render the data, like pricing, description, image, whatever, on your static site. And then you just click and add things to your cart, which can be handled purely by JavaScript in your browser.
Okay.
And when you decide to make the purchase, you go to a designated checkout page, and you then use APIs to communicate that transaction to their platform. Sometimes you might need to do server-side rendering, server-side calculations like serverless functions to handle secret keys and stuff, but it's really simple how it works in principle. And this allows developers to build custom tailored interfaces and styles for their web store, and also gives the benefit that the customer doesn't have to leave your site at any point. They don't have to go to any weird URL, shopify.com. They can be on your site all the time.
One site to rule them all. So I could make, and I think what we're seeing is, and that, so it's, sorry, I want to stick on that one concept because, so JAMstack is almost all JavaScript, right? It doesn't actually have to be all JavaScript, but it normally is JavaScript. But some of my JavaScript is going to be run on the build server when I'm building my site, so that's on a server. And then some of my JavaScript is going to be written and it's going to run in the browser. So like they click on checkout, that's actually going to call an Ajax API or a fetch API kind of thing in the browser to do that dynamically. So that's how I have my cart and everything. And one of the things that they could be calling back to is like a serverless function. So Netlify and Vercel can both host not only your static site, but these serverless function, which are also called microservices, or some people call them Lambda functions. That actually runs on the server in a very small little function to do like payment through Stripe or payment through Shopify, something like that. So these are just the different ways that APIs can all work together. That's super exciting because I know there's so many stories, even of Shopify, where someone started up a Shopify store and they're like Facebook legends, and they're, I think the one was like these two guys had a makeup line, and they had 1 million people come to their Shopify site. And even though they were like maxed out with Shopify, that site went down because of something they configured or something that had happened, right? Whereas with a static site generator, the site would, at very least, it would stay up, right? The site is going to stay up. It's not going to go down. It's all rendered. When someone clicks something, add to cart, then it might be, okay, we don't have any stock left or something like that, but at least the site is going to stay up. So that's one of the reasons why it's so, that it's so popular and it's so good and robust, I should say. And we saw that actually with one of our customers where on Black Friday, they came to us and said, we're done with our site going down on Black Friday. They had a homegrown e-commerce it was some weird old school e-commerce, and it was the same deal. And same idea. It's like, we need our site to stay up during Black Friday. And I think that's a good test. As you mentioned, if you have an advertisement, sometimes it's like every time we send out our marketing emails, the promo emails, our site gets hammered and it goes down, right? So that's a really good argument for JAMstack, for Headless CMS and Headless Ecommerce, to put those three tools working together. And we often get, I want to move on to another kind of topic. So I feel like I'm leading the discussion here, but this is really exciting for me. Is people come to us and say, well, does your JAMstack site integrate with e-commerce? And like, which is kind of a strange question because it's just an API, everything integrates. How do you answer that question? I know you must get it all the time. Does your solution integrate with that solution, or can it integrate with this? How do you answer those questions?
I always answer, if they have an API, it will integrate.
Right.
So generally speaking, if we want to integrate with anything, if that anything has an API, we can integrate to that, and
Right.
it's really that simple, because with JAMstack, it's pure data, pure API calls. It's, for a developer, it's so easy to just work with a setup like that. So we don't have to, okay, again, in contrast to something like WordPress, sometimes with plugins and other things in that the ecosystem don't have as simple setup as we can have with JAMstack, where we just communicate with APIs, which to me is really simple, a simple approach for integrating anything.
Yeah. So that's awesome. So definitely, e-commerce is a big one. What about things like, authentication, and when you want to have registration on your site, so you have a list of users that are going to be on there, and maybe they're doing, maybe you have blog comments or something like that, or you want people to register. Obviously, they're going to register for e-commerce, so that would be part of an e-commerce package. But if it was just a thing where you want people to like fill out forms on your website or something like that, or sign up, what's some good services for that?
Actually, we have used, again, in Hotel Radio, we use a service called Auth0, which is an API-based authentication. And also, this allows us to outsource some of the more complex features to an API-based service like Auth0, which out of the box gives us Google, Facebook, whatever, single sign-ons. And I've built a couple of custom authentication setups.
We all have.
And it's doable, but it takes a lot of time. And it's, if you make a mistake, it's going to be crucial. But if you source it to something like Auth0, you can do it in half of the time, and you can bet it's more secure than doing something yourself really quickly.
So it's almost like, as a developer, and I want to get into the JAMstack sort of development, or I want to really be successful in sort of JAMstack, I kind of need to know what tools are available so that I don't build too much custom stuff, right? Because I could build a whole authentication platform and do a bunch of stuff that I don't need to do because there's a tool for it. And if there isn't a tool for it, how would you do it then? So maybe not an authentication system, I wouldn't really recommend that. But say I've got some proprietary data somewhere in my, it's in a MySQL database, or it's in a SQL Server database, and it's in Azure, right? How would you access, if you run into those kind of situations where they need to make that data available on their static site, but there's no API yet because it's customary proprietary data?
Well, in those cases, again, what we've done on Hotel Radio, that we have our own GraphQL-based API node server. Right. So in these cases, when things get really complicated and simple Lambda or serverless functions are not enough, or we need to have our own database, we can spin up a GraphQL API service to act as a supporting, again, API, but we have full control over that API and can do a lot of backend stuff by controlling our own API. But this, again, it's in the JAMstack philosophy, because when something can be done off the shelf, it's really easy to spin up your own API and use that to fill in the gaps. So that, to me, is a very powerful feature. Of course, it can be done with other technologies, but the way JAMstack is built, it's so lean, it's easy to do this very quickly. And
so that's interesting. Very similar case to what so one of our customers, they're an Agility CMS customer, but their developers talk to us about how they build solutions. They have their own API, right? They have their own thing that they built, and that API is built 100% in .NET, in C#. And the question was, well, we have this C# API, so we can't use JAMstack, right? And it's not true at all, because as long as the API can talk to, as long as it is a standard, JSON, or you mentioned GraphQL, if it's some sort of standardized format that's going to pull in content, JavaScript can access it. And I don't think there's any kind of REST GraphQL or any kind of API that JavaScript can't pull now. It's amazing how robust it has become as a language, especially when you're running it on Node, because then you don't have to worry about a browser compatibility. It's running on the server there, right, during the build process.
Yeah.
Do you guys use TypeScript?
No, we haven't used TypeScript. One of the reasons is that we simply don't feel like we need to right now with this project. We don't do anything that business critical other than e-commerce, but again, that the most critical parts are handled in the API ends, and we can really work with just plain JavaScript the way we work with code. We don't need types. I agree that TypeScript is a great thing. I used to love developing Java, and it has and C# as well, and it's really heavily typed, and that's a great thing for many reasons. But we don't use TypeScript.
Okay, so let's just go a little bit further on this one too. Because like JavaScript is becoming very versatile and it's really moving forward. Sorry, not sure if questions are at the end. Oh, actually, we have a question from Kevin. I want to jump to that. I'd like to ask Joel if the Agility.NET SDK is actively used by outside parties, what kind of apps people are using it for versus the JavaScript SDK. So great question, Kevin, very specific to Agility, and I'm happy to answer that. The Agility.NET SDK has been around since the web forms days. It has been used by a ton of companies and a ton of websites that are out there. So I would consider it, we're actually going to start calling it our legacy API because it actually uses SOAP to talk to Agility, which is kind of an old school XML thing. The JavaScript SDK is much more widely adopted now. It's like as of 2019 is when we rolled it out the first time. It's sort of exploding in use, available on NPM, and much better for building JAMstack sites. What's cool about the JavaScript SDK is it's built on a new API layer that we are going to build, and we'll build a new .NET SDK on top of that layer eventually. So by all means, if you're an ASP.NET person, go ahead, use the, download the thing from NuGet for .NET Core 3.1 or whatever. But if you're going to build a JAMstack site, absolutely use the new SDK there. So, and I would recommend looking at JAMstack. I think that's the way the world is going. It's the way the future is kind of going. But yes, if you're an ASP.NET person and that's your deal, the .NET SDK has been around for a long time. It's really robust. And now back to our regularly scheduled programming with Max. So moving forward, like this is 2021. What's the future look like for Ikius?
We're seeing a lot of customers more interested in Headless CMS and JAMstack development. And we're also pushing JAMstack to a lot of like non-tech savvy clients who need a very good high-performing website. And we're trying to communicate and spread the word of JAMstack for as many people as possible. And also using JAMstack to streamline our agency services, which plays a huge role in running an agency, because a lot of the stuff we do in addition to consulting and communicating with clients is actually developing stuff. And the leaner and faster our stack is, the better we can work and the more efficient our work is. And hence we can be more efficient in the markets. So that's
a great question. So do you have like your own set of like component libraries or starter projects that you use when you sort of have, especially when it's like, oh, we've done a site that's very similar to that one, we have a starter project or a starter template. Do you have those things that you kind of have in your toolkit?
Well, we don't have anything formal, but we have, as a small company, non-written ways of working where we might have, we know how a certain flow works, and we can pretty easily replicate that because we've done it and we can done it again. And usually when we do something again, we can find new ways of doing it even better. So that's kind of our thing. But definitely for JAMstack, it would be great to have starter templates and to get up and running really quickly. I believe Agility has a lot of starter templates to get up and running with JAMstack quickly. Can you tell a little bit more about those?
Well, Max, I'd love to talk about those. Yes, so we have definitely on our home. So you can sign up for a free Agility CMS account right now that it gives you a Gatsby starter and a Next.js starter. The Next.js starter, I think, is really, really cool, not just because it's on Next.js, but allows you to automatically deploy it to Vercel for free. So you get a free Agility account, Vercel account, just uses your GitHub, but it's using styled components and Tailwind CSS. So, which is like a utility CSS library. So very, very quickly, there's a ton of components in there that we haven't even implemented that you can just use inside that project. So we do have those starters. We also worked with Vercel on a project that they did called their virtual conference. So Next.js had a conference was it in October or November last year, where it was all virtual. And they open sourced the code for it and then said, hey, you know what? We're going to get 4 or 5 different CMS providers to all implement how it would be on their CMS, which is a great idea to compare. Now, unfortunately, because we were one of the CMSs that they use. So you can go to, I don't know, vercel.com/virtual conference, something like that. And you can get that starter and do that. We will probably be making a version of that takes advantage of page management. So that's one of the things that almost every JAMstack site that's not on Agility out there has hard-coded pages in a sitemap, which I have a real problem with because I don't want to have to go and write some code when a new page needs to be on the site. So Agility lets you do page management, which is sort of our claim to fame. So that starter doesn't have page management. What I've been working on lately is some e-commerce starters. So I have a couple of those published sort of unofficially. They're not like click here and start with it, but there are starter like GitHubs where one's with Shopify, and I'm just working on one right now with BigCommerce that's used. I don't know if you've heard of Next Commerce. So at the next conference, they actually announced their commerce integration with BigCommerce. They're probably doing Shopify soon. So I've been working on that. And we also have done some where I think Josh, who's part of our chat, he's on the chat here, he put one together with something called Snipcart. And that's a cool little starter where Snipcart is an e-commerce platform where it pulls the products from your site. So you don't have to have a product database. So it's really, really cool. Another Canadian company, sort of seeing some really cool stuff from there. So yeah, we are building starters galore. And I've also built because I just love learning code. I love learning different frameworks. So I've built starters for Vue, for Nuxt. I actually built one for Svelte. So they're on my GitHub. So my GitHub is full of all kinds of me testing out different code. So, for an old guy, I'm pretty old in this ecosystem, but I love to learn new things. So that's my biggest advice. Get out there, learn stuff, learn what tools work for you and for your company. I think, Max, you're a great example of that. Your agency is thriving in a world when it's actually really hard to run a development agency sometimes. So you guys are doing great. And I think probably because, first of all, you're really smart, but also
Thank you.
You've become a thought leader. So you and Agility, you guys wrote this book. So I should say we wrote this book together, this ebook. Tell me a little bit about that, because you become a leader in the JAMstack space, I think partially because of the work you've done to learn about that.
Yeah, well, we wrote an ebook with Agility, and it tells you the fundamentals about JAMstack, and a lot of the content was actually from our Ikius blog, and that content was made when I was learning more about JAMstack and doing JAMstack.
Right. Yeah.
And again, as you said, that the learning process is so fun. So it was fun for me to write that content while I was learning. And in that JAMstack ebook, which you can download somewhere here in the chat, it tells you that journey from coming from legacy web development background and going through from JAMstack Zero to JAMstack Hero, kind of from running an agency and doing JAMstack sites in practice, seeing how they work, how they perform, because not a lot of companies not a lot of companies had the chance to do that, but we were a new company. We didn't have any legacy projects, so we could start from a clean slate. And yeah, that's basically the content of the ebook as well. So it tells you the story of how JAMstack has evolved ever since that. And also also a lot of insights from Agility, from how to spin up JAMstack quickly and how you can improve your business by using JAMstack. So you should definitely download it and
download the book, do some reading, learn some stuff. And I think that honestly, I think what I'm hearing from a lot of developers too is, how do I sell this both to my team? Because I need, we're on an old version of this or that or some other thing. Developers want to use the latest and greatest. I wouldn't even say it's cutting edge anymore. This is just, to me, JAMstack is kind of mainstream technology now. And so developers want to feel like they're like with the, following where the trends are going and where the trends have gone. The trends have gone towards JAMstack. This is the way the world is going. So learn about it. And then if you read the book, it actually helps you teach a JAMstack to other people too. And my advice to all developers out there is that if you teach it to somebody else, you will learn it much better. And it was actually James at Agility who brought that phrase into my head, and it's really stuck with me. And so that's why one of the reasons I really love seeing somebody like Max teaching it to the world, because I know that you're just teaching what you learned, right? That was in your blog, you learned it, you teach it, and then now you're a thought leader, and everyone's experience from that is so richer, and you just help the whole ecosystem. And I think that's a really, really admirable thing to do. And so I would like to reach out to everyone that's here today. If you guys want to talk and learn and teach about JAMstack, reach out to us. Follow us, reach out to us on Twitter or however, get on the Slack channel and say, hey, I'd like to do a webinar with you guys. I'd like to be a guest, and we'd love to have you on here. We've had over 1,000 attendees over the past sort of, I don't know how long, and registrants sign up for these things. So they're pretty small individually, but they really add up in terms of the number of people you can reach. And I know lots of people have been downloading that ebook and reading it. So it's just a great way to learn stuff. And this has been great. I think we're pretty much at our time. I want to give Max a chance to answer some more questions if there's any more questions coming in. I think most of the folks are just kind of getting links and how do I learn about this or that. So I think that's all great. But I'd like to reach out to say, hey, if you have any more questions, please jump in. Max, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, kind of on the same line here, that if you have any questions or you want to learn more about JAMstack, feel free to reach out, and I'm more than happy to discuss more about how you can become a better JAMstack developer, or how you can boost your agency with JAMstack, or anything related to it. And it's been really fun to have this discussion and webinar. I've learned a lot as well here during this hour, and hopefully our audience has learned something as well from this webinar. And I want to thank everyone attending. Those are my final words.
Thanks, Max. This has been great. Really appreciated the chance to talk to Max, and thanks for coming out. Definitely follow us on Twitter. Stay connected with the community. The thing I like the most about JAMstack, it is a community of very kind people and developers who really help each other out, as well as that ecosystem is growing beyond developers now too. So definitely join the community however you can, on Twitter, on Slack, email us. You could even call us if you wanted to. If you wanted to phone us, you could phone us.
Yeah, for sure.
But all right, that's great. Max, I can't wait to talk to you again. This has been great. And thanks everybody for coming out. And I think we're good. Take care, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you.